Yanks are coming with a vengeance. Within 7 weeks...
When black American GIs started arriving in Britain in 1942, the US Department of Defense produced a film to educate the young men who were due to be stationed here about what sort of welcome they might receive.
Well, goodbye, ma'am.
Goodbye. It's been very nice meeting you both.
Glad to have met you, I'm sure.
Funny you should come from Birmingham, too, isn't it? Have you come to my Birmingham, you come to my home and have a cup of tea with me.
It's estimated that at least 2 million American servicemen passed through the UK during World War II, and tens of thousands of them were black.
Now, let's be frank about it. There are colored soldiers as well as white here, and there are less social restrictions in this country. Just what you heard, an English woman asking a colored boy to tea. She was polite about it, and he was polite about it. Now, look, that might not happen at home, but the point is, we're not at home. And the point is, too, if we bring a lot of prejudices here, what are we going to do about them?
The African-American GIs stationed in Britain were forced to abide by the racial segregation laws that applied in the deep south of the US. Lucy Bland is a historian and the author of Britain's Brown Babies.
It's a segregated army. It says segregated in 1948. The vast majority of the GIs came from the deep south, and white GIs attacked black GIs with impunity. That's what's so shocking. The thing is, the American soldiers were all under the jurisdiction of the American military. So they had very particular jobs. The black GIs, they came and built the air bases. In fact, they were not allowed to fly. They built the air bases, they maintained the planes. They weren't allowed in Britain to bear arms.
The black soldiers often formed positive relationships with local people. And not just their skin colour, but their manners and attitudes made them stand out from their white American counterparts.
They were pretty much all over the country, particularly sort of home counties, East Anglia.
And these areas were very white areas.
Very white areas. Many people had never seen a black person before, except probably on a film.
And how were the black GIs treated by the locals?
Well, the black GIs were often really liked, and they were seen as much more attractive than the white GIs because they were seen as much politer. So I think for many, they were very attractive.
But no matter how attractive, black GIs in the segregated US Army were forbidden from marrying their white girlfriends.
Although the US military denied that there was an actual law, every GI had to get permission from the commanding officer. And invariably, the commanding officers who were white would refuse it. And if pushed, their rationale was that back in the States, there were then 48 states, 30 had anti-miscegenation laws that forbade marriage between whites and blacks.
Local people in Ipswich were very surprised at how badly the black GIs were treated compared to the white.
Babs Gibson Ward is one of about 2,000 babies born to white British women and black American GIs during World War II.
The people in East Anglia were very supportive of the black GIs, and so they would invite them to their homes, invite them for family meals. The family that I was born into, they got to know my natural father very well.
Babs's mother was already married to an English naval officer when she met a black US Air Force engineer at a dance.
I guess one thing led to another when they started socialising with the local GIs, and they had, parties and dances and things like that going on.
Lucy Bland says even when the black GIs were off base, they were still subject to the US Army's racial segregation rules.
And then they have these dances, again, segregated by colours. So certain nights it will be a so-called black dance and then a white dance. And pubs also, quite a lot of pubs. This will be a black pub, that will be a white pub.
Then relationships started to form, and both my mother and her sister paired up with GIs.
Her mother fell pregnant in 1944, but she never told her black GI boyfriend about the baby. He returned to the US without knowing. When her mother's Navy officer husband returned after the war, he didn't question whether he was Babs's father until later.
My skin was very fair, and so she thought, I think, that she was going to get away with it and pass me off as his. But by the time the following late spring happened, my skin started to darken significantly, and it was obvious that I wasn't his child. my stepfather, when he realised I was put out in the garden, at the bottom of the garden, and not allowed to come into the house, which meant that she knew that I would have to be put into care.
Nearly half of the mixed-race babies were given up to children's homes, but few were adopted. They were thought too hard to place. The African-American press named these children brown babies. The British called them half-castes. When she was just 5 months old, Babs was sent away from her family in Ipswich. She lived in a children's home for the next 4 years. Then a foster family came forward, and it seemed like a new start. But Babs faced racial abuse at school.
People in the neighbourhood wouldn't allow their children to play with me. And then when I went to school, most of the hostility was actually encouraged by my classroom teacher. He would actually get the children to ridicule me. He would take me out into the playground with the children and tell them that I could climb a pole like a monkey climbs a tree. And so if they asked me, then I should demonstrate this at playtime. And this used to really, really upset me. And then the other thing he did was he sat me at the back of the classroom, away from all of the other children, and he would give me jigsaw puzzles and colouring books. And he would tell the other children that I didn't have the same brain as white children. I wasn't being taught like the other children. I was just left to play at the back of the class.
And when you were racially abused by your teacher and made to feel stupid, did you understand why that was happening?
No, I didn't. I really didn't. They more or less said that because I was different, that I didn't have the same intelligence as all of the other children, the white children in the class. But I refused to believe it.
When her foster mother died, Babs was removed from her foster family and placed in another children's home. She was 10 years old. 3 years later, her birth mother came to collect her, nearly 14 years after she had given her up. It was not the reunion that Babs had expected.
The matron introduced me to this woman who she said was my mother, and she was a total stranger. So I looked at her and I was puzzled because not only was she a total stranger, but she was white. And I couldn't make sense of any of this because I always thought my natural mother would be like me.
At this stage, Babs, did you know anything about your mother?
No, absolutely nothing.
Until that day when you were 14?
Yeah.
And how were you feeling?
I didn't have a say. I had to go home with her. And I didn't want to.
So she never told you why she'd come to collect you or why she'd waited all this time?
No.
Babs Gibson Ward had a difficult relationship with her birth mother, who had split up with her husband and was abusive to her mixed-race child. Babs was musically gifted, but her mother ignored teachers who encouraged her talents. Eventually, Babs left home and trained as a nurse. It was at this point that she started to try to find out more about her birth father. But even getting basic information from the children's charity Barnardo's, which held her records, wasn't easy.
And it wasn't until there was the Freedom of Information Act that was passed that I decided to have another go. And I went down to Barnardo's to ask to see my records.
Lucy Bland says that once records started being made available in the 1990s, it was remarkable how much information there was.
So lots of people who've been in Barnardo's have had a huge struggle to get the records. And when they do get the records, what's extraordinary is the very minute detail that is kept about them. You know, every kind of day there's something written, often pretty unpleasant, sort of so-and-so did this or did that. And they'll know all about the parents, but have lied to the children and told them nothing.
And once I got those records, then I started to trace my roots really in America. My father was alive up to his 89th birthday, but then died of cancer. And so I never met him.
How difficult was it for you to get this information about your birth father?
They didn't want to give any information to me. They just said they had a duty to protect other people's relationships and lives. And so what that meant was I had to do most of the research myself. I actually wrote to one of the officials that would do the family trace in America. And I was able to get his social security number. I was able to get a copy of his death certificate. I was able to get named people on that death certificate.
And what did it mean to you to find this American family and to find out more about your birth father?
I think for me it means that at least I have some understanding of where I come from. And it would be lovely just to know that they're interested in me as I am as interested in them.
Having been lied to by her birth mother and given no information by the children's home, what Babs discovered about her father was a revelation to her.
I managed to trace my grandmother, and as soon as she saw me, she instantly said that I was my father's double. And that's the first I ever heard anybody make any reference to him.
This lack of knowledge about their family histories has had a hugely detrimental effect and meant that many of these children have gone on to have very difficult lives. Lucy Bland.
They really had a kind of history that was sort of wiped out for them as well. So they were growing up in kind of ignorance about their roots, about their heritage. So that lack of belonging, not only were the British not embracing them as British, and they were legally British with British mothers, but they knew nothing about their past. And, they experienced so much kind of ostracism and racism and stigma that I think they were really constructed as kind of outsiders. And I think that was incredibly hard for them. So it's been an unknown history that should be known.
Many of the so-called brown babies, now in their early 70s, have spent a lifetime searching for their parents, and Babs knows that being able to trace her father, she is one of the luckier ones.
Well, it made me realise that I'm not alone. There's many people in the same situation as me. But I have found out a lot more than most people know about their roots.
And what would it have meant to you, Babs, if you had been able to find out more about your birth father earlier?
I think to know whether we are alike, whether, we share the same interests. So I was sad that I did not have an opportunity to write to him, But I can't turn the clock back. Not to know anything about yourself is really tough. To go through life in a family and have a whole neighbourhood not want to play with you, not want to let their children play with you, is tough. And not to understand why, other than that you're the wrong shade. I never wanted to be anything different to what I was. I just wanted to be accepted for who I was. But I think what it does for me is it will always be there. I will always have some kind of deficit in my life of never knowing, true family relationships.
That was Babs Gibson Ward. I was also talking to Lucy Bland, the author of Britain's Brown Babies, for this edition of Witness History.